In the wake of World War II, the US government is engaged in a large number of secret medical experiments designed to help win the Cold War. Developing techniques for mind control to create a so-called Manchurian candidate. What is the extent of these brainwashing experiments? How did the CIA become involved in such far-reaching and disturbing research?
Man is on a quest.
The brain is made of thousands of different kinds of cells, maybe tens of thousands. They come in different shapes, they're made out of different molecules, and they project and connect to different brain regions. And they also change different ways in different disease states. Just to make it concrete, there's a class of cells, a fairly small cell, an inhibitory cell that quiets its neighbors. It's one of the cells that seem to be atrophied in disorders like schizophrenia, called the basket cell. And this cell is one of the thousands of kinds of cell that we are learning about. New ones are being discovered every day. As just a second example, these pyramidal cells, large cells, they can span a significant fraction of the brain. They're excitatory, and these are some of the cells that might be overactive in disorders such as epilepsy. Every one of these cells is an incredible electrical device. They receive inputs from thousands of upstream partners and compute their own electrical outputs, which then, if they pass a certain threshold, will go to thousands of downstream partners. And this process, which takes just a millisecond or so, happens thousands of times a minute in every one of your 100 billion cells, as long as you live and think and feel. So how are we going to figure out what this circuit does? Ideally, we could go through this circuit and turn these different kinds of cell on and off and see whether we could figure out which ones contribute to certain functions and which ones go wrong in certain pathologies. If we could activate cells, we could see what powers they can unleash, what they can initiate and sustain. If we could turn them off, then we could try and figure out what they're necessary for. And that's the story I'm going to tell you about today. An odyssey where we've gone through, over the last 11 years, through an attempt to find ways of turning circuits and cells and parts and pathways of the brain on and off, both to understand the science and also to confront some of the issues that face us all as humans.
But how close are we to actual mind control?
We're sent back to the idea of ultra-precise control. Could we dial in information precisely where we want it to go? So when I started in neuroscience 11 years ago, I had trained as an electrical engineer and a physicist. And the first thing I thought about was, well, if these neurons are electrical devices, all we need to do is to find some way of driving those electrical changes at a distance. If we could turn on the electricity in one cell, but not its neighbors, that would give us the tool we need to activate and shut down these different cells to figure out what they do and how they contribute to the networks in which they're embedded. And also, it allows us to have the ultra-precise control we need in order to fix the circuit computations that have gone awry. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, there are many molecules that exist in nature which are able to convert light into electricity. If we could turn on the electricity in one cell, but not its neighbors, that would give us the tool we need to activate and shut down these different cells to figure out what they do and how they contribute to the networks in which they're embedded. And also, it allows us to have the ultra-precise control we need in order to fix the circuit computations that have gone awry. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, there are many molecules that exist in nature which are able to convert light into electricity. You can think of them as little proteins that are like solar cells. If we can install these molecules in neurons somehow, then these neurons would become electrically drivable with light, and their neighbors, which don't have this molecule, would not. There's one other magic trick you need to make this all happen, and that's really get light into the brain. So how do we do this? Around 2004, in collaboration with Georg Nagel and Carl Deisseroth, this vision came to fruition. There's a certain alga that swims in the wild, and it needs to navigate towards light in order to photosynthesize optimally. And it senses light with a little eye spot, which works not unlike how our eye works. In its membrane, boundary, it contains little proteins that indeed can convert light into electricity. So these molecules are called channelrhodopsins. And each of these proteins acts just like that solar cell that I told you about. When blue light hits it, it opens up a little hole and allows charged particles to enter the eye spot. And that allows this eye spot to have an electrical signal just like a solar cell charging up a battery. So what we need to do is to take these molecules and somehow install them in neurons. And because it's a protein, it's encoded for in the DNA of this organism. So all we got to do is take that DNA, put it into a gene therapy vector, like a virus, and put it into neurons. So it turned out that this was a very productive time in gene therapy, and lots of viruses were coming along. So this turned out to be fairly simple to do. And early in the morning, one day in the summer of 2004, we gave it a try, and it worked on the first try. You take this DNA and you put it into the neuron. The neuron uses its natural protein-making machinery to fabricate these little light-sensitive proteins and install them all over the cell, like putting solar panels on a roof. And the next thing you know, you have a neuron which can be activated with light. So this is very powerful. One of the tricks you have to do is to figure out how to deliver these genes to the cells that you want and not all the other neighbors, right? And you can do that. You can tweak the viruses so they hit just some cells and not others. And there's other genetic tricks you can play in order to get light-activated cells. This field has now come to be known as optogenetics. And just as one example of the kind of thing you can do, you can take a complex network, use one of these viruses to deliver the gene just to one kind of cell in this dense network. And then when you shine light on the entire network, just that cell type will be activated. So for example, let's consider that basket cell I told you about earlier, the one that's atrophied in schizophrenia and the one that is inhibitory. If we can deliver that gene to these cells, and they're not being altered by the expression of the gene, of course, and then flash blue light over the entire brain network, just these cells are going to be driven. And when the light turns off, these cells go back to normal. So there don't seem to be adverse events to that. Not only can you use this to study what these cells do, what their power is in computing in the brain, but you can also use this to try and figure out, well, maybe we could jazz up the activity of these cells.
I think I heard you say is you can now control the brain in two colors, like an on-off switch.
That's right.
Which makes every impulse going through the brain a binary code.
Right. Yeah, so with blue light, we can drive information in the form of a 1, and by turning things off, it's more or less a 0. So our hope is to eventually build brain coprocessors that work with the brain.
1. Crack the code on how the brain processes information. 2. Develop the technology to tap into, even steal, thoughts. 3. Perfect the means to remote control another person's actions. Right now, in secret and public, scientists are working on the important first step to reading the mind. But how? The brain's complexity dwarfs that of any existing computer. There are approximately 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, in the human brain, almost as numerous as the stars in the Milky Way. Each of these cells has a negative electrical charge inside the cell and a positive charge along the outside of the cell membrane, in essence creating a tiny electric battery. Think of it as the brain's software, the world's most sophisticated search engine.
Inside our heads, the nerve cells are all engaged in kind of a telephone-like conversation, one speaking to the next, and as the information is going through, each neuron is listening to all of its neighbors, giving rise to more and more complicated signal processing inside our brains.
But the first critical step to cracking the code of how the brain processes information is being able to listen in on these millions of telephone-like conversations all taking place at once. Believe it or not, as information passes through the brain, the electrical impulses between neurons can be heard. But how close are we to actual mind control?
We're hoping to use this as a way of testing what neural codes can drive certain behaviors and certain thoughts and certain feelings, and use that to understand more about the brain.
Does that mean that someday you could download memories and maybe upload them?
Well, it's something we're starting to work on very hard. Yeah, we're now working on some work where we're trying to tile the brain with recording elements too, so we can record information and then drive information back in, sort of computing what the brain needs in order to augment its information processing.
Well, that might change a couple of things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here are the facts. Look at the sky over any modern city. Chances are you'll see line-shaped clouds mixed with the normal cloud cover. These are called contrails. When jets fly through the air, they leave trails of water vapor in their wake. This vapor dissipates a few minutes after the jet passes. The government claims these clouds are a harmless result of engine exhaust. I'm no meteorologist. When I hear about the weather, I take the experts at their word. However, some sources reject this explanation. Sure, this sounds ridiculous. We're comparing clouds to tanks and missiles. But the US does conduct atmospheric research and has extensive experimental facilities. Consider HAARP in Alaska. HAARP conducts experiments in Earth's ionosphere, 35 miles from the planet's surface. We already have the ability to manipulate the weather. Some theorists think our government can also create earthquakes and manipulate electromagnetic fields. Chemtrails might only be side effects of these secret weapons. The electromagnetic waves used by these weapon systems might distort and discolor clouds. When you see a chemtrail or odd clouds, you might be seeing the effects of an invisible global weapon. Could this be possible? The next time you find yourself outdoors on a sunny day, look at the clouds. Do they seem normal? Are these trails in the sky the normal streaks of jets and the normal movement of clouds and wind? Or is there something else up there?
Very suspicious chemtrail webs. My area was sprayed a week ago, very heavy. Since then we've had 2 hard rains, so all the fibers disappeared. But as of yesterday, October 31st, Halloween, these fibers started falling again, and they're continuing to fall November 1st, midday. And as you can see, there's just a huge amount of stuff up there. You've got to look almost straight into the sun to see it. It's just kind of circling around. But my trees are now coated again. And in the 1 week since these webs appeared, all my spiders have died. I only have 1 spider left. I used to have dozens or hundreds. Every time you turn your head, there's another spider with or 2 or 3 spiders. Now there's only 1 left. So this is an issue for the EPA to look at what this crap is. And is it really killing? Oh my gosh, there's just huge flocks of this junk up there. I wish I could show it a little better. Maybe I'll back out a little bit. Just enormous masses of this stuff. But I also want to appeal for some labs to step up. If the EPA is not going to do their job, then someone needs to do, atomic absorption, spectrophotometry on it, or X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, any of these simple lab techniques to tell us the exact atomic composition. Is it aluminum? Is it barium? Is it strontium? We need to know.
Is someone privately doing that? We haven't been told, but we do know that people like Bill Gates are rolling out their big bucks for climate scientists to study large-scale geoengineering projects. He's bankrolling it, and it's admittedly going on according to UK reports, American government reports.
Why control the weather if you can control the people? Here's where it gets crazy. Some researchers believe chemtrails are a kind of mind control. According to this theory, the chemicals spread through chemtrails wear down the immune system.
can see it's moving. This is one of those fiber pieces that it's a tiny little fiber ball that gets in your clothes, gets on your clothes, gets in your environment, your bedding.
Sure, this sounds ridiculous. We're comparing clouds to tanks and missiles. But the US does conduct atmospheric research and has extensive experimental facilities. Consider HAARP in Alaska. HAARP conducts experiments in Earth's ionosphere, 35 miles from the planet's surface. We already have the ability to manipulate the weather. Some theorists think our government can also create earthquakes and manipulate electromagnetic fields. Chemtrails might only be side effects of these secret weapons. The electromagnetic waves used by these weapon systems might distort and discolor clouds. When you see a chemtrail or odd clouds, you might be seeing the effects of an invisible global weapon. Could this be possible? The next time you find yourself outdoors on a sunny day, look at the clouds. Do they seem normal? Are these trails in the sky the normal streaks of jets and the normal movement of clouds and wind? Or is there something else up there?
We also face a new threat that the next epidemic has a good chance of originating on a computer screen.
Here's the heavy metal testing that came back, and this is mine here, this one on this side, which mine was heavier because I had not had any kind of cleansing, heavy metal cleansing at all. My family member had 5 intravenous treatments. The gadolinium was still really high, like very toxic on both. That's a radioactive heavy metal. Never had an MRI, shouldn't have that in my blood at all. Tin, same thing, extremely high. No wonder why I was so dizzy and feeling horrible all the time. I'm sure it's gone down by now. I need to have it retested, but anyway. Then you have, lead, mercury, really high in those. Cadmium, rubidium. You get some colors coming in there on this piece, very interesting. And I'm going to show you some other stuff with this piece that's fascinating. This is quite the piece here, this piece of metal. So what happened basically was a family member of mine had really their toe was hurting, their big toe was hurting very badly. And so I recommended that they go ahead and get a bath and do the Epsom salts and really get clean and really get cleaned out and everything and see if that had anything to do with it. Well, so we did Epsom salts and that kind of thing, and so some heavy metals seemed to be coming out in the water, and it was little tiny pieces of almost looks like some writing there too. Little tiny pieces of metal were coming out, very, very thin, which I'll show you in a second. But anyway, they were coming out super thin. No kinds of little hidden things in here. Okay, so this side's not lighting it up, so we're going to move it so we can light it up because we want to really see what it says. And you have to get just the right light or you won't be able to see it. It's really tricky. And so far, I am not being successful. There we go. Okay. It's hidden. Now, why does it have to be hidden? I would like to know. And why can you only see it in the microscope? Why is that? I don't know. Do you know? Tricky. Very tricky. Basically, it says Underwriters Laboratory Inc. is what it says. I can see it probably a little better in my microscope. Then it looks like there's a maybe an N with a period right there. I thought it might be a V, but there's another piece to it there, so see if we can get it a little more clear. Here we go. That's a little clearer for you to read. Okay, and here we go. We see it even better over here. This is the underwriter's part, which is being eaten away by this biological stuff, and it will continue eating it away. It eats the metal, I think. It's definitely attracted to metal, and I think it gains some kind of energy from metal, because this piece actually, you could almost see the whole, there you go, underwriters, you can almost see it now, but you could see the whole thing before, actually. And see, it even has like a trademark and everything. See the trademark there? The little R is trademark. Let me see if I can get a little better light on this. There's an end little piece right there that's growing out of this. Those are like the little roots that get into us. Disgusting. Yeah, somehow these are some little nano fibers that were created and getting into our skin, that can actually get into your skin. I've actually found a few that were like halfway in, halfway out of my skin. That's pretty bizarre. Whoever created this thing is a piece of crap, and I'm sure it was a combination of different people, and possibly it was created by accident. Maybe it's a conversion of two different GMOs that have come together, or possibly it's something that oh, that's an old one that I was messing with earlier. Possibly it was something that was meant to be created. If that's the case, it's unbelievable. I mean, whoever did this will stand before God someday, and I'm not going to judge them because that's God's realm, but I will tell you that somebody that would do this to people, it's just unbelievable. They most likely will be in some pretty serious trouble when they face God and go into the second death, which is not the physical death, but the second death is when you are separated from God for all eternity and you go into the lake of fire. And that's because you reject Christ and His free offering of salvation. So it's the one thing that God cannot forgive you for. It's the only thing. Every other sin has been forgiven, except that one, blaspheming the Holy Spirit, which is basically saying to God, you know, I don't need your gift of salvation. Maybe they think they can do it on their own. Maybe they think they're doing a service to mankind by doing this, by unleashing this on people. I don't know. I don't know what they think. I don't know what any of these guys are thinking. I'm not sure they are thinking, because this kind of stuff being turned loose on humanity, hurting people, crippling people's health, it's going to cost our government even more money. It's costing insurance companies money. It's horrible. The whole thing is horrible. And yeah, I really feel sorry for whoever created something like this and unleashed it on mankind. And I really don't see the point. I just really don't see the point of causing such, I don't know, just causing such horrific, health problems for people. I don't really see the point of that. But people are sick. That's all I can say. So anyway, I'm glad we got one that was moving around and that was interesting, and I'm glad we got to watch it. It looks like it's not moving around anymore. It's met some kind of demise or stopped moving because it doesn't like me anymore. It doesn't want to perform for me under the lights. So I'm perfectly, oop, there, I think I saw a little piece of it up here.
on the carpet, stains on the memory, screaming me over and over and over. Songs about happiness, murmured in dreams, when the both of us knew how the ending would be. So it's all coming back round